All right, guys, so it never ceases to amaze me, right, how much the liberal media will try to incorporate race in every single conversation, right? They will try to incorporate race everywhere, okay? And to me, I find it so ironic here because while they're talking about race from the angle of trying to reduce racism or fight racism, they seem to be calling for more racism, right? In the process, they're calling for more racism. And a lot of times, as they're doing that, they're saying racist things themselves. And this time, we have Miss Tiffany D. Cross, once again, who is on MSNBC, who I like to call Joy Reid Light or Joyless Reid, is having a conversation about increasing diversity in the trucking industry. Okay, and I want you guys to listen to this conversation because to me, it sounds like she's essentially making an argument that if we had less white men in the trucking industry, then we would have less aggressive truck drivers and truck drivers would be more helpful in general. Take a listen.
I have to tell you, my brother is a truck driver, and he drives across the country, and it's very nerve-wracking to me when he's on the road because it feels like a dangerous industry. But you're trying to disrupt that and bring more people who look like us to the industry. Tell us why.
Yes, ma'am. First of all, thank you for having me this morning. And yes, we are. And we say we're not building truck drivers, but safe CMB operators, folks that can get back to their home whenever they're done with their shift. That's the most important part, ma'am.
Well, how can the industry be more welcoming? Because I have to tell you, I talked to a lot of truck drivers and preparing for this segment, and most of these truck drivers were people of color, and they talked about, hearing some of the racism over the CB. This is, again, an industry populated by a lot of white men over the age of 55. This group of people overwhelmingly voted for Trump. Some people have talked about, aggressive truck drivers cutting them off or not being helpful. So obviously, the more populated it is with people of color, I think you'll see less of that. But how can you encourage people to come and disrupt this space when it seems a bit unwelcoming?
Well, I think just what you're doing, getting myself as a black female out there and letting people know I drove for almost 8 years. And yes, ran into lots of racism, but however, was out there to do my job. And I think that women are definitely, the more we can just get the news out to them, that trucking is an industry that will not only help them to get further in life, but their family and all of that, and present the package to them appropriately, regardless of what anybody else has to say. They're going to be in charge. They're going to be the person behind that steering wheel doing the job every single day and making it happen. So we just need to get the word out there. And I appreciate you for helping us get this word out. The women will be able to close this deficit if we can just let them know. Give them the support that they need to get into the industry.
Yeah.
All right. So I just love how MSNBC always finds a way to ruin a legitimate conversation, right? I think there's a legitimate conversation to be had about the supply chain issues going on in this country and the shortage of truck drivers, right? That's a legitimate conversation that MSNBC should be having. But they find a way to ruin the conversation and to delegitimize the conversation by incorporating race, right? By incorporating race in a place where I don't think the argument is actually really necessary or true that Miss Tiffany Cross here is trying to make, right? In which she basically at one point said that the majority of truck drivers are white males, I think over 55, she said, and a lot of them are Trump voters, right? And she's implying that the industry is not diverse enough, right? It's not diverse enough for them because it's primarily white males. And then she goes on to make the statement that, there's reports of, these truck drivers being aggressive, cutting people off, not being helpful. And she thinks that problem can be solved by having less white males as truck drivers. So essentially what she's implying here is that white people, or particularly white males, are inherently aggressive truck drivers and they're not helpful, right? They're not helpful. And that you will have less aggressive truck drivers if you just had a more diverse truck driving industry. Again, it never ceases to amaze me how these media outlets will just ruin a legitimate conversation by incorporating things that are just absolutely ridiculous. Okay? Because let's talk about diversity in the trucking industry. Now, I don't know necessarily where MSNBC got those Bureau of Labor statistics from that they put about the demographics in the trucking industry because it doesn't add up to 100%. So I don't even know if it's actually true. I'm not even sure exactly what they're trying to say here. But the statistics that I have in regards to the demographics of the trucking industry actually suggest that the trucking industry is pretty diverse, right? And if you mean by diverse, it means matches the actual overall population, as 62% of truck drivers are white, followed by 16.9% being Hispanic or Latino, and 14.1% being black. Now, when the woke revolutionaries always want to talk about diversity in this country, they talk about representation. They talk about proportional representation. And if you look at the truck driving industry, right, if you take my statistics that I got from Zapier here, right, which has a database of these demographics and things like that, it almost matches the exact demographics of the population, right? Because the demographics of the population, non-whites are 60%, Hispanic or Latinos are 18.5%, and blacks are 13.4%. Right? So if anything, Latinos are slightly unrepresented. Blacks are slightly overly represented. And whites are slightly overrepresented in the trucking industry. Right? So where is this lack of diversity that Miss Tiffany Cross is talking about? Where is the lack of diversity? Because again, the demographics here by race are proportional to that of the population. So isn't the trucking industry an example of what the woke revolutionaries claim that they want? Right? Shouldn't it be an example of how things should work, right? In regards to representation in the workplace. But again, that's not enough for these people. It was never enough for these people. This is just what they said to get the idiots on board with their woke supremacy, right? Because what they actually really want is that any industry that's dominated by white people, right? Even though white people are most of the population, these people seem to forget that. Any industry that's dominated by them, where they have more people in the industry, oh, that industry is racist, right? There's racism in that industry, and that it has to be more diverse, right? Diversity and inclusion basically means we want to take over and we want more proportional representation than whites. That's what it means. And again, I find it fascinating how these news anchors, for all the claims that they go out here and make, the wild claims that they make, they're allowed to come on TV and just say, hey, you know, some people said this, some people said that, so therefore the industry is racist, right? She's not required to actually back up anything she says or any type of facts, right, or evidence. She's not required to. She can just go on TV and say it. She's allowed to go on TV and say, oh, well, you know, some people said this and that, right? And nobody's ever going to say anything about it. Nobody's ever going to give any pushback, okay? Now, when it comes to the part about the interview, when it comes to women and truck drivers and stuff like that, I mean, look, yeah, I mean, the industry is overly populated by men. But why is that? Do women actually want to be truck drivers, right? Do women see themselves as truck drivers, or do they pursue those type of careers? If they don't pursue those careers, then hey, they're just not pursuing those careers. Maybe women are just not that interested in being truck drivers. There's some of them who are. There's some of them who aren't. That doesn't necessarily mean that's an inherent problem that we have to fix and that there's some type of inequality going on. No, it just means that women don't want to be truck drivers, right? Again, it's the same thing when people want to complain about the so-called gender wage gap. And it's like, no, the gender wage gap does not exist when you actually account for all the factors in terms of why women don't make as much as men. Like the fact that they take more time off. Okay? Like the fact that they don't negotiate their salaries or their wages like men do. Like the fact that they don't pursue the same career opportunities that men pursue. So when you start to account for all those factors, the gender wage gap disappears. And I think that applies to a lot of things where people want to say there's some perceived inequality because men and women aren't employed 50-50, right? No, women just probably not interested in being truck drivers. And if they want to be truck drivers, I have no issues with women being truck drivers. I don't see why they can't be truck drivers. But it just seems like they're not interested in it. And I'm not sure if pushing women to become truck drivers is necessarily the key to solving this global supply chain crisis. But at the end of the day, I mean, if they want to join the industry, if that's what they want to do, I have no issues with it. But let's not talk about this as if, you know, one group of people is inherently bad, right? And that they're the cause of all the problems in the industry, and that the industry is all of a sudden going to be there's all of a sudden going to be less aggressive truck drivers on the road and people are going to be more helpful because people of color are now dominating the industry. Again, it's silly stuff, man. Again, it's almost like they're implying that white people are just inherently bad people. That's what a lot of these people go on TV and imply. And then once you question them about it and you call them out about what they're saying, they want to act dumb like nobody's saying that when they say it almost every single day. But let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.